Hi, and welcome to this webinar, Facts Not Fear. I'm Lisa Leitner, and I hope to inform you today on what's really going on with public education and special education right now, and what we really need to do as parents and advocates to mobilize ourselves for this coming school year. If we haven't met, I'm Lisa Leitner. I'm an advocate and lobbyist. And as of October, I will be a published author. So please look for my book. It is currently on Amazon, it's on Barnes and Noble, and most other book websites. I also have online training called Don't IEP Alone Academy, and registration for that will be opening up around Labor Day. It's usually like the first week or two of September. So if you want to take my online training this year, pay attention. Go to my website, don't IEP, don'tIEPalone.com or dayinourshoes.com and sign up for email. And I promise you that you'll hear about it. Today, what we want to talk about is what really has changed in public education or special education since January, what hasn't changed, and what we can do as parents and advocates. So let me just tell you, first of all, I've been doing this lobbying thing for a really long time. And a couple of personal philosophies that I use or adhere to. One is that I focus on people's actions versus just their words. I think it's important to stay informed of things that people say on TV, things that they say on social media and the news and things like that. But what we really need to focus our energy on is what legislation was passed or what was proposed, what was not proposed, how did people vote on such legislation and things like that. I'm much more concerned about the actual actions rather than just dumb things that people say out there in the world. The other thing is to keep your sanity and to keep from spiraling into, oh my gosh, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. Focus on what you can control. I can't control what anybody else does besides myself. I can't control what's happening in Washington or Harrisburg or any of the other places where these legislative changes are happening, but I can focus on what I do. And I am going to contribute my part for as long as I can and continue to hopefully engage others in doing the same so that we do have a larger voice. And the third one that I've adopted recently is adapt now, but advocate always. So if I offer a solution that some people go, oh, well, they're supposed to do that. They have to do that. It's a law. I get that. And I'm not letting anyone off the hook for their legal responsibilities. However, I think it's important, again, that we adapt now and advocate always because we are in unusual times. So first of all, let's talk about what didn't change. Okay. The big one that didn't change is that IDEA is still there. IDEA is still IDEA. It's in place and it is a federal statute from 1975. It will celebrate its 50th anniversary this November. That is when President Ford signed it into law in November of 1975. And it's still there, right? So it feels like it's disappearing, but it's not. It's still there. This is something that not everyone understands. I just want to briefly go over it because this is what didn't change. There's been a lot of talk in recent months about we're returning educational control up to the states. We're returning it to the states. We're going to leave it up to the states. This is not new. This is not a change. There's this boring law that only boring history nerds like myself know about called the General Education Provisions Act. It was passed in 1974. And so what it says is, it says a lot of things, but it prohibits the federal government from controlling or dictating curriculum in schools. It also prevents the federal government from prohibiting any specific curriculum in schools. It basically says that all curriculum decisions for a public school need to happen at the state and local level, but they still need to be in compliance with federal laws. So that's why we do have all these big laws like our civil rights laws, IDEA, and so on. But it's up to the states to implement them without violating those laws. There is no greater evidence of the power of a school district than the fact that you're reading in the media how there are certain extremist groups, such as Moms for Liberty, who are essentially taking over local school boards. They're finding candidates, they're vetting candidates, they're supporting and promoting candidates so that their ideas and their philosophies are on the school board. And in many cases, they have gone into communities and taken over a majority of the school board. So they know the power of a local school district. They know that these curriculum decisions are made at the local school district level. That's why they're all running for school board. So this is not new. This leave it up to the states, or I don't want the federal government doing this. They never did. They never did. Okay. What also didn't change, and I've been an advocate nationally for over 10 years, I haven't heard of any significant negative changes to any state as far as their service, special education services, your rights, or things like that. I believe it was Texas made some changes regarding dyslexia. Connecticut made a few changes, but I mean, nothing significant like that would violate IDEA, or no state legislator came in and made any kind of big change to special education laws. So that did not change. So let's talk about, okay, well then what did change? Changes. Okay, let's talk about the big one first. The U.S. Department of Education. And for each of these things, whether they happened by executive order or, whatever the method was for this change, most of them are still being fought out in the courts, or trying to be passed through Congress and things like that. But there has been executive orders and things put forth, and thousands of employees at the U.S. Department of Education were let go. One of the court cases went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has actually affirmed that, yes, it was okay for those employees to be let go, and that one held. Others have been returned to work. But the U.S. Department of Education had three main jobs, and one was to kind of oversee the big laws and the big civil rights laws like IDEA. They were to distribute funding, and they did the whole college loan, student loan, like that was them. That's who oversaw it. Now, those specific tasks have been pieced out and given to different agencies. But what that means is that there's going to be a greater variability in services and protections. So if you have been an advocate, or if you've been a working advocate, or if you've been a parent who has been really engaged in a situation, and perhaps you found yourself on the U.S. Department of Ed website in recent years, you know that they put out these things like these guidance letters, and they put out Dear Colleague letters. So, for example, they came out with the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Ed, they would come out with these guidance letters, and one was about COVID, right? They came out with one about COVID, I'm going to say 1 or 2 months into COVID, right? When we were like, what do we do? The U.S. Department of Ed said, here's what you need to do, and everybody still gets FAPE and all these other things. They also came out with some guidance on behaviors and dealing with behaviors and special education students, and suspensions and discipline and FBAs and all that. And they list some best practices. Now, again, their role is not to direct curriculum or tell a state or a local school district exactly what they have to do, right? The GEPA prevents that. But they were like this overseer, and they would just interpret the laws, and they would say, well, this is how we interpret this, and this is how we interpret that. and just sharing those best practice ideas and things like that. So what we're going to see as far as students is, without that centralized body, we're going to see a greater variability as far as what kids are getting in Pennsylvania versus New Jersey versus Arkansas, right? Now is the time, if you haven't yet familiarized yourself. Everybody worries about, what does IDEA say? What you really need to be concerned with now is look at your state level regs and what are those policies say? What do those regs say? Parent groups are going to be more important than ever. So consider forming or joining your special ed PTA, different disability rights groups that perhaps support your child's condition and things like that. The other thing, the good news here is that parents can create a lot of change, and it's really hard to create change at the federal level. To get all 50 states on board and to get a federal legislator to propose legislation and to have it really go through all that Congress is a very, very difficult task. It's much easier, and it's a much shorter path to facilitate change at the state level. So don't lose faith that, because there's no Department of Ed and nobody's going to be overseeing IDEA. A lot of great things have happened at the state level. And, even just in the past 20 years that I've had my son, I've seen parents in Pennsylvania do some pretty amazing things as far as getting legislation passed. So there was another executive order that ends all federal DEI programs. So the money's gone. The money's gone. I don't know how else to say it other than the money's gone. If he's ending it, he's ending it. Again, this is another thing that all of these, I'm not going to keep saying it every slide. All of these are being battled out in the courts, and most of them also in Congress, because according to our Constitution, only Congress can tax and spend. So it's supposed to be Congress who makes these decisions, and if all these monies were already congressionally approved, and all that. So all of these things are still being fought out, but until it's resolved, this is where we are. So there's just going to be fewer resources for marginalized groups. Whenever we're talking about DEI programs and DEI students, I think a lot of people automatically go to skin color. And what we need to remember is that it includes our kids too. So if that DEI money goes away, that means special ed, not special ed, but special needs programming, inclusion programs, stuff like that. That's going to be gone. Okay. Another executive order that bans what schools can teach. Now remember, the GEPA of 1974 says that the federal government cannot force a state or a school district to teach a specific curriculum, and it can also not prevent them from teaching a specific curriculum. So this also is being fought in the courts, but it basically bans anything about gender ideology, CRT, and other diversity-related content. So Disability Awareness Week, Autism Awareness Week, all those things. We saw this in February. I have long been a supporter of Rare Disease Week and Rare Disease Day, and that was canceled this year, right? So we're not talking about it anymore. We're not talking about rare diseases. We're not talking about people who are different. So doesn't mean that we can't talk about it on a personal level, and I would encourage you to do so. I would encourage you to partner with, again, your PTAs, with your teachers, with your friends, and say, hey, let me run a program for Autism Awareness Day or a fun day or something, right? It's gonna fall on us, or it's not going to happen. This one really bothers me. Again, it's being fought in the courts, but if you are a teacher or staff person and you are supporting a student who is transgender and as far as the word support, that's being defined very loosely. But as far as maybe using preferred pronouns, things like that, different names, um, if you support that person, you could be charged. Um, so, again, partner with your schools, partner with support groups, partner with different alliances, and find out like what is the goal or what is the plan for your specific district. And yes, if I did live in one of these districts where Moms for Liberty had taken over my school board, I would be worried. I really, really would be worried. Um, because it shouldn't. I'm not going to go off on a tangent, but just know that this is out there and that it's happening. Civil rights. So I told you that the U.S. Department of Ed, one of their main 3 jobs used to be to enforce the civil rights laws that affect education. Half of all the OCR, Office of Civil Rights investigators, have been fired. I would not recommend that as a dispute resolution option or a complaint option right now. I mean, you can do one, but I would not expect it to be investigated in any kind of timely manner if they fired more than half of the investigators and closed all those offices. Like, I don't know who, that's the point, right? And now the enforcement supposedly goes to the Department of Justice. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to filing a complaint with them and seeing what happens with that. I'm just waiting for kind of like the right client and the right situation, and I will definitely keep you posted. But you want to learn your other complaint options. I have seen students get compensatory education through an OCR complaint. I've seen a lot of positives happen. I've seen a lot of it be kind of boring, and the OCR just said, well, the school district personnel needs to get training, stuff like that. But I've seen a lot of good things happen out of OCR complaints. So, it'll be back. It'll be back. But until then, know what your other dispute and complaint options are. Title I funding, which of course supports lower income schools. I believe it's more than 60% of schools in America receive at least some Title I funding, and about half of them, a little over 40%, are rural schools. It is a myth that all Title I schools are in the inner cities and these quote unquote bad neighborhoods. That's not true. Half of them are in very rural areas. So that means if they lose funding, they're already low income schools to begin with. We're already seeing paras and aides and support staff being let go. There are some districts I've seen on social media. One was just the one out in Dauphin County, which is 2 counties over from me. And the one district is let go of every para. So consider getting active in school boards, seeing what's going on. The other thing is that you want to shore up your IEP and make sure that if you have an aide or a para, that it is very clearly defined that it is a 1-on-1 or a 1-on-3 or whatever the case may be, that your child's ratios as far as staff to your student are clearly defined. If it's not clearly defined, then yeah, it might just say like I've seen these tricky words like adult support, things like that, adult assistance, and it doesn't define that it's a 1-on-1. So you don't have a lot of legal ground to stand on if that aide or para gets let go because of budget issues. More money cuts, and a lot of this is taking place in different areas. Medicaid being one of the big ones too, and SNAP. Excuse me. And eliminating, school breakfasts, school lunches, Head Start programs, and things like that. We know that hunger and food insecurity affect learning. We know that a lot of these Head Start opportunities are essential for younger children, especially those with disabilities. So again, connect locally. Think global and act local, but connect locally and think about what you can do if this is affecting you or you want to create change in this area. As far as, maybe partnering with a community group or your church or something like that to provide these different services. Now, I don't I want these programs to return. I want my tax dollars to go to things like this rather than in billionaires' pockets. That's my own personal belief system. I do think that we're going to get back there. But when I say like, oh, well, maybe create a food drive or, have a food drive or something like that, I'm not saying I'm letting these people off the hook for the responsibilities, because I do want us to get back to that point where my money is being spent on building new highways and feeding hungry children. But until then, adapt now, advocate always. Okay. In the big, beautiful bill, there is a federal voucher program. And I actually should have probably put the other slide first. So let me skip ahead now that I'm seeing this. Because a lot of parents, I find, don't understand how vouchers work, whether it's at the state or federal level. I'm going to give you a brief overview of how they work. A voucher is just that, right? It's a voucher. It's a check. It might not even be cash. It might be a tax credit. But what it is that it's a voucher for a certain amount of money that is taken from your public school district where you live, and it is given to individuals to go spend on the private school of their choice. Now, a lot of parents are in favor of this because, hey, wouldn't we all love to send our kids to private schools? The only reason that we don't is that we can't afford it. So they think this is a great idea. As vouchers are set up now, they are set up to fail for so many reasons. So the first reason is that it takes the money out of the public school, but the school is still there. So if you have, you still have a building to heat and you still have a school bus run, just because the school bus now has 45 students instead of 50 students on it, you still have to pay the bus driver and you still have to pay for the bus and you still have to heat the building and all that stuff and plow the parking lot in the winter. But there's less money to do all of that with, right? The money leaves the school district budget, but the costs don't decrease proportionally. Then there's the other piece about the private schools. Private schools are not required to provide special education. It's that simple. So, first and foremost, most of our kids are going to be excluded from a voucher. If your child needs special education, you can't go to that school. Just because they're using public voucher money doesn't bind them to having to provide FAPE and IDEA. They don't. So the other thing is that they can pick and choose their students. So if you're not a stellar student or you have behavior issues or anything like that, they can remove you. It's a choice, right? Remember, school choice is a choice, but the school gets a choice too. They get to choose their students. They don't have to take just everybody. And then the other thing is that what parents who even find themselves in favor of this program don't realize is that, okay, let's say your state decides that your school voucher amount is $5,000 per student, which is not unreasonable. I think North Carolina gives 5. I think others, somewhere it's around $5,000 or $10,000. What if your private school is $20,000 a year? What if it's $15,000 a year? What if it's 10, but your school district's only giving you 5? Do you have an extra $5,000? Many parents do not. And so even though there is a voucher program in their state, they don't have the money to fill that gap between the voucher amount and the real tuition amount. So what it essentially ends up being, and this has been proven through all the data nationally, is that out of all the school vouchers being used nationally, only about 10% of them are creating new school enrollments. The other 80 to 90% is essentially just giving money back to people who are already going to send their kid to private school. Okay? And so what it does is it depletes the public school of money just so that people who are going to send their kids to private school anyway get a tax refund or a check, something like that. So now with the big beautiful bill, there is a new voucher program. So plain and simple, schools are going to lose money. Schools are going to lose money, and those schools usually do not have to follow IDEA. So keep yourself informed on that and what is going on in your local community. So this is more about colleges, but it will trickle down and it will affect, of course, disabled college students. But when you're targeting woke colleges and telling colleges, well, you have to do this and you have to do that, or we're going to take away your accreditation, we're going to take away your tax breaks, we're going to take away your funding, there's a lot less diversity in programming on college campuses. Weakening ADA and things like that. So there's going to be fewer supports on college campuses for any of these marginalized students. And again, when we're talking about DEI, the I is for inclusion, and that means our students are disabled kiddos as well. Lastly, there's been some kind of crazy stuff proposed which is just strange because they're like, we don't want the federal government to tell us what to do, but they're like really busy telling people what to do. All of these things in place, and it almost always comes with a threat of funding. Like, if you don't do this, we're going to withhold funding. But things like getting parents to elect principals, like, could you imagine what a nightmare that would be? Eliminate a lot of school administrators, merit pay. I don't even know how they would judge merit pay and things like that. But what that will, like, our elections are already a nightmare. Could you imagine if there was an election for a school principal? Anyway, just keep your eyes and ears to the ground and know what's going on in your local community, and form these alliances and get together with people who support you so that you can act if it happens. Okay, and that just about wraps it up. I know I've been kind of flat today, not super energetic and inspiring as I can be sometimes. We did not get here in Back to School 2025. We are not sitting here where we are with all these different programs being dismantled because of one act, because of one election, because of one law that got passed, and so on and so on. It's been a series of things that have been happening over decades, and it's going to take a long, sustained effort to get back to where we need to be. And that is, of course, really seeing some positive change for special education and our kids. So definitely know your rights under IDEA and GEPA, but know what your state regs say. Organize and gather together with parents. You're going to have to show up. We do have to rally. We do have to call our legislators. It should be a weekly task for you to be calling a legislator every week about something. Donate if you can. $5 helps. Donate to candidates who support what you support. Show up at public meetings, submit written comments when they say, oh, we're going to have a public hearing on this. Go and hear and talk. Submit your testimony in writing or do whatever it needs to do. Learn to become active because we cannot be passive. They're counting on us to be quiet and, hoping maybe we go back to, well, I don't even know what they want. But I know that I'm not going back to the decades of the 1950s and the 1960s when kids like mine were just either institutionalized routinely or they stayed at home all day with mom and did not go to school. So thank you so much for being here. Definitely check out adayinourshoes.com, don'tiePalone.com. I also have the podcast. Again, I have my online training. Registration for that will open around Labor Day and will be open the first 2 weeks of September. Until then, I do have some much lesser priced products. If you want to try out the IEP toolkit, I have a mini course on IEP progress monitoring. And of course, what I'm really looking forward to in October, my book release will be, I believe it's October 13th. My book will be available in bookstores, and you can get that now. If you go to adayinourshoes.com/book, there's ordering information there. So thank you so much for being here today. And as always, you can join our village at village.adayinourshoes.com and ask any more questions.